Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite teas, and it's a tea that I drink every day, Pu'er, and how there's two different types of Pu'er and what's the fundamental difference between the two. Now before we begin, I highly recommend you check out our back catalog of episodes, in particular the ones that deal with Pu'er or dark tea. Pu'er is a type of dark tea, and I'll make sure that I put some episodes that are germane up here. Pu'er is the one category of the 6 categories of tea that I do drink daily. I've mentioned this in some past episodes. I think probably most famously the top 3 healthiest teas. Also, what are my top 5 favorite teas? I just like the taste of Pu'er. I like its earthy, musky, almost composty taste. But I also understand that many people don't like it, and I totally understand that. You know, I've mentioned in the episode, like, where do I start? Like, where do I approach tea? Most people either know tea from either like green or black, start from there, and then kind of widen to the teas that are close. Don't just jump into Pu'er, and because Pu'er is an acquired taste. Now, the Pu'er that we sell 3 different Pu'ers as of the recording of this episode. We have regular Pu'er, then we have ginger Pu'er, and then we have Pu'er Tuocha, which are in the bird's nest. All these would be considered ripe Pu'er or show Pu'er. So there's 2 types of Pu'er. There's Sheng Pu'er and Show Pu'er. In other words, we're going to call these raw and ripe. Now, Pu'er is made from the Camellia sinensis, the China bush, not from the Assamica. And you find the growth of Pu'er kind of in the Yunnan province of China. This is the very almost primitive forests that you find in kind of southwestern China that kind of borders Laos and Thailand. And over there you find a variety of the China bush that has very broad leaves. And the thing about Pu'er, or we'll just call it dark teas, because Pu'er is the most famous of the dark teas, is that this is one of the most famous teas. We've talked about in that episode on, I think it's called 4,500 Years of Tea History in 10 Minutes, that Pu'er, or fermented tea, has been around for at least 2,000 years. And this tea was one of the most famous teas in that we used to compress it into bricks, into cakes, because it was just easier for transport. If you think of the famous Silk Road from 2,000 years ago, this type of tea was one of the teas that was being transported. And why did it make sense to have them in bricks? And also, they would mix it with salt and other things. They would actually eat this tea as well. But it just made sense because loose tea and loose leaf tea really didn't come into fashion until the Ming Dynasty, really around the 1600s. In fact, the emperor at the time made it a decree that all tea had to be loose leaf. But remember, loose leaf could spill, it could fall, but if you have them in these hard bricks, they're just easier to carry around. Either way, so Pu'er. So what they do with Pu'er is they're going to use lower leaves. We've talked about in previous episodes where you grab the leaf also can determine caffeine level and other things, but they're going to grab the more mature leaves. They're going to use a cultivar for Pu'er that is bigger leafed, that has essentially been a cultivar for Pu'er forever. So they're not going to be grabbing leaves from a cultivar that's been used for white tea. So what they do is they're going to pluck these leaves, and so they almost do what they do with green tea. You're going to kill green it, but they don't kill green it to 100% like we do it with green tea. They're going to kill green it, but still leave enough of the enzymes. Well, what's going to happen there? Well, if you don't kill green it, it's going to start breaking down. And so raw Pu'er or Sheng Pu'er is going to be kill greened but not fully, and this is going to lead to some fermentation. And so they're just going to leave it out. They're going to leave it out, they'll check on it, they'll move it around, they'll fluff it up to make sure it gets even distribution of air, but it's going to start fermenting because it's not fully co-greened. And that's what essentially going to be raw Pu'er. If you look at raw Pu'er looks like green tea, and then they can compress it into different shapes if that's what you want. Raw Pu'er as a whole, I would tell you, tends to have a green tea taste. It's green in its taste. It's kind of vegetal. It's I wouldn't say like taste super greeny, but if you're more used to the Pu'er that's more popular in the West, which is ripe Pu'er, it's kind of a mixture of like a green tea with a ripe Pu'er. But it's definitely, if you drank only ripe Pu'er and you drink raw Pu'er, you're like, oh, this is a taste like what I'm used to. Because over here in the West, raw Pu'er is not that popular. It is not popular at all. And a little backstory. So Pu'er got really big in the West right before the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And so it kind of hit this mass in the early social media zeitgeist. And so they started cranking out a lot of Pu'er. And then the Pu'er market just crashed after the Beijing Olympics, probably because there was a lot of bad Pu'er being put out there. And so now Pu'er is better. The prices got really crazy, but the prices are lower and the quality is better because even the tea masters in China realized that Pu'er boom and bust was not good. Now, so how do you go from raw Pu'er to what we drink mostly in the West, which is ripe Pu'er? Well, what they essentially do is they get the Mao Cha, so that's the raw Pu'er, the green Pu'er. And then what they're going to do is they're essentially going to wrap it. They're going to wrap it and cover it. And what that is going to cause, of course, and they'll do this for a long time, it's going to cause it to ferment even more, right? Because it's again, it was never kill-greened. And the thing going back to raw Pu'er is when you get raw Pu'er or Sheng Pu'er, and it's in cakes or whatever it is, bricks, it's still fermenting. You know, the thing about Pu'er is that it's like wine; it gets better with age. And with the raw Pu'er, the Sheng Pu'er, I mean, it could take years, if not decades, if not hundreds of years, for it to get really to the point where it is ripe Pu'er. But some people will want to drink raw Pu'er. I'm not a big fan of raw Pu'er. So either way, so they cover up the leaves, and then eventually this is going to lead to a lot of fermentation. They'll do this for a long time. A lot of mold will build up. Again, you know, Pu'er is a probiotic drink. It's got mostly mold. Fungus, I should say, not as much bacteria. Like you see, like with Greek yogurt, it's mostly bacteria. Some of the other probiotic stuff is more bacteria than it is fungus. I think with Pu'er, it's more fungus than it is bacteria. So what's going to happen is over time, the greenish of the raw Pu'er is going to turn black, which is more familiar with what we know with ripe Pu'er. And so ripe Pu'er, if done well, and we've talked about in a previous episode, like how do you know when you have bad ripe Pu'er? And I have a retort. There's an episode we have like retorting to my Pu'er smells like fish and what you can do about it. First of all, your Pu'er shouldn't smell like fish. If it smells fishy, then it probably isn't high quality Pu'er. But there's some things you can do, like you can steep the first steep for like 30 seconds and pour it out, because normally the more fishy smell that some people feel it has is diminished after you throw out that first quick steep. So eventually what happens is that now we have ripened Pu'er, which is more blackened, and then they can compress that into cakes and so forth. Like we have Tuocha, for example. So the large majority of Americans who drink Pu'er are drinking ripe Pu'er. And the other thing is that ripe Pu'er is not the traditional Pu'er. The traditional Pu'er is raw Pu'er. That has been, if you liked ripe Pu'er, has been ripened by natural aging. But what we did, or what the tea masters in China did, is they perfected a technique back in the 70s to accelerate the process from going from Sheng Pu'er to Shou Pu'er, or from raw Pu'er to ripe Pu'er. And so this acceleration has helped us in the West in that we have more access and quicker access to ripe Pu'er. And this is why in the West, when you're drinking ripe Pu'er, it's mostly ripe. And I would say that the West has much more of a taste for ripe Pu'er, or the black Pu'er, the one that can taste very woodsy, very musky, the ones that we sell at the tea store. They have much more of a taste for that than for raw Pu'er. And so when you look at the market for Pu'er, is mostly going to be, the predominance of it is going to be ripened Pu'er. And I think it's best also because I just like the taste of ripened Pu'er more than raw Pu'er. Now, ripened Pu'er can age with time, just like raw Pu'er. So if we have an episode like how should you store your teas, and you should keep them away from spices and all these things. You should be airtight containers. But with Pu'er, it's a totally different thing. With ripe Pu'er, whether you have the leaves or the tuocha, you can leave them on your table. You can have them leave them on air. They are impervious to getting bad. If anything, you leaving them out in the air is actually going to be better for them in the long run when you drink them. And I've mentioned before, like some people, great gift to give somebody who loves tea is give them a tea cake. And then what they do is, like every anniversary, they break off a piece and they drink that together, because these tea cakes don't get bad. And they're just a great presentation. We talked about blooming teas. Blooming teas are a great presentation tea. They get small and then they get really big. But pu'er in the forms of cakes and bricks and all these things are just amazing. Tea cakes are amazing. Typically they're wrapped in a white cloth and then they're packed in 6. They're just amazing. They're just very, very beautiful. So in closing, there's 2 types of pu'er. There's raw pu'er, which tends to be green and more vegetal tasting, and then from raw pu'er, they call the Mao Cha, they make ripe pu'er, but we can accelerate that now. We've kind of biohacked it to accelerate it quicker, and ripe pu'er is the pu'er that we saw as the pu'er that's more common in the West, and both pu'ers age very well with time. And so if you've never had pu'er, give it a shot. And I would tell you, like with all things, drink it 3-4 times. Don't drink something once and be like, I don't like this anymore. Give it 3-4 times because sometimes you develop a taste. But give it a shot if you've never tried it. Guys, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. What's your history with pu'er? Until next time, take care and God bless.